Yeah, hello everyone. I'm your disruptive element in this conference because I should have participated in the communications panel, and I'm actually very happy that I could step in the consumer panel because when I talk about communication, it's always from a consumer's perspective. So when we would like to start with my first slide, and when we talk about better communication, it is about a paradigm shift, and I think most of you will agree, hopefully, that we have seen in recent years a very strong shift from being product-centric to more about customer-centric. And the astonishing thing I see in my consulting and branding work is that most of the industry have embraced that shift, except for most of the energy companies. So they still think from the inside out and not about whom they want to address. And actually, I see a huge opportunity here because as we have the situation, anyone in the world needs an energy provider. So you have the audience here, and that's a huge opportunity, and that's so different from many other services and products out there in the world. So do something with it. For those who are a little bit worried, and I often can sense that when I talk to CEOs, that they're a little bit scared about, seriously, thinking about the customer? We're not used to that. They don't say that, but you can feel it. And I will say that, well, relax, don't worry. It's still about sales. It's still about the business, of course, but you should start taking the customer more seriously. And when we talk about that, it will lead to trust, and I like that we have heard a lot about trust already in the keynotes we have heard today, but that's only one half of the medallion, because trust, of course, is a connection to your brand, and it's a huge opportunity when you want to sell something. But I always miss in a lot of statements from companies that it is also about relevance you need to build in people's lives. So trust is a good thing, but if you're not relevant to people, why should anyone care about you? So basically the key to start a better business is by start listening to your customers. And that's what we embrace very much in our company. And Pia, one of the partners of Edenspiekermann, who's here with me, is especially an expert in that. And we carried out a project I will tell you about shortly. And this is the e.on case. So it was a case 2 years ago. And actually, I'm a little bit sad that no one of e.on made it here to the conference, but I'm happy to share some of the insights. So they approached it with a very specific task. So this time it was not about advertising. It was actually about payment default through service communication. They had a huge problem. So it was, as it is so often, about the bottom line, so money, because payment default is a serious issue. And actually, the reminder process, taking legal action, cutting people off in the worst case of the pipeline, is a very costly thing. And they approached us and asked, could we do something about it? And we said, well, certainly we can. And we carried out a research, not in the classical sense that you make online service or call people up. We actually went to people at home, invited people, and this was so new to them. For us, it is so astonishing that this is such a new thing, because what is more obvious than simply asking your customer how they feel about you? And when we did that, we came up with personas. So if you're not familiar with the term persona, it's about a prototypical a target group. So it's a representative of a type of customer, but it's based on research. So you don't make things up. It's not a fantasy. It's based on research. And to make it more graspable for you, I have one example. So we developed 6 personas. And one of the most interesting is Nadine. And she's, I think, very representative for a lot of customers, not only in Germany, but throughout the world. So she doesn't care about energy. She wants to have everything run smoothly. She pays her bill. In Germany, that's annually. And her attitude is, well, I don't want to have debt. So debt for her is a bad thing. And she's actually very proud of it because she thinks a lot of people out there don't even care if they pay on time or if they have debt. And she says, I want to have everything in order. And now there occurs a situation where she accidentally failed to pay one time. And she gets a payment reminder from Ian saying, hey, you need to pay. And she feels actually very embarrassed about it because, as I said, she usually wants to have everything in order. So she is, in fact, this one time unable to pay at once. So what this creates on an emotional level is embarrassment and worry. And the brand has to deal with that. So we looked at how Ian tackled that in the past before we introduced the change. So the service department would approach her, get back to her, and basically say, you have to pay, and this comes with a threat of legal action. And it is, you don't have to be a psychologist to think about what that creates on an emotional level with a customer. It's not only uncertainty, it's frustration. And it's especially frustrating as we have here a very loyal customer. She has been with that company for 20 years. And they say, wow, I slipped one time and this is how you treat me? That feels really bad. So what the communication was after our project is that the same service department that already existed approached her but called her up and said, well, we noticed you missed that last invoice. Is everything okay? Is there anything we can do to fix this together? So it was a simple change in how you approach people. It didn't cost a thing more because the infrastructure is already there. But in fact, it cut a lot of costs because all these several payment reminders and legal action is very costly. And the impact is great because what it creates on the emotional side is that she feels acknowledged and relieved and taken care of and taken seriously. So that was kind of surprising to the company that such a little change can have such a great impact. But we didn't stop at this point looking at the direct communication. We had a look at all the touch points Ian is using in direct communication, and I think that's true for a lot of companies that use direct communication. So what were the touch points apart from advertising? So the customers of Ian got an annual invoice. Not a very nice thing to get, isn't it? Not very inspiring. Notification of price increase. Yeah, you were waiting for that, right? The customer helpline, you only needed that if lights went out. So, Jim, you mentioned that earlier. That's actually not a very nice thing to do. You don't want to deal with a helpline. Or you receive direct marketing ad mail trying to sell you a new tariff, to upgrade to something, selling you additional services, and people think, I don't need that. Don't bother me at all. Or the worst thing, if you failed to pay once, you get a payment reminder. So what's the effect of all this? A negative brand experience. And it was so surprising that e.on didn't realize that they create a lot of negative brand experiences, which you can fix actually very easily. And this is basically true for all of the personas. So no matter what customer type you were, you had basically only negative brand experiences. So to sum it up, what can we learn from this, and what's the takeaway for energy brands? So as obvious as it sounds, I can strongly encourage you only to listen to your customer, and that means like not having only the standard survey you're probably carrying out. Actually talk to people, invite them to workshops, and they feel very appreciative of this if you ask them for their opinion and their experience for the very first time. Also treat customers individually, like the example with Nadine. So in this case, simply one call makes clear what the problem is, and it was easy to fix. Simple payment plan, and it was done. If you go a little beyond out of that case, offer relevant and helpful services. So we heard also something about innovation and how important innovation is. Kevin mentioned that. I agree, but I would like to add something, because if the service is not relevant, why should people care and why should people buy? And to make something relevant, you have to understand people. And if you're in that loop, you will create positive experiences. And I don't think it comes with a higher marketing spending, not at all. I like what Nick, what you said earlier, because I just want to emphasize it once again, don't promise something you can't keep. Don't try to be someone you're not, because people are not stupid. And I think Tamara will tell us later about how transparent everything is, especially with social media. People will find out and they will talk about it, and then you're screwed, and you can't fix that with money. So to sum it finally up, when talking about your brand, you should not talk only about products and services, but tell stories that matter to people and that create a connection between your brand and your consumers, and that ultimately, as a side effect, will lead to better business. Thank you.